On this episode of the Ask Mike Reinold Show, we talk about some of our best tips on starting a cash-based physical therapy practice.
The Ask Mike Reinold Show. Helping people feel better, move better, and perform better.
Before we get to the podcast, I wanted to make sure you knew about my free online course on the Introduction to Performance Therapy and Training. If you want to learn how to get started optimizing and enhancing performance, this is the course for you. Head to mikereinold.com/performance to sign up today. Welcome back, everybody. Latest episode of the Ask Mike Reinold Show. I'm here up at Champion PT and Performance up in Boston. We're here answering your questions, sports PT, performance, career advice, anything you want to talk about. Head to mikereinold.com and click on that podcast link, and you can fill out the form to keep asking us questions. Let's see. I am here today with Lenny Macrina, Lisa Lowe, Mike Scudo, Anthony Vedetto, Kevin Coughlin, Dan Pope, Dave Tilley. Whew. That's a lot of great minds on one Zoom grid thing, right?
I think so, Bob.
Who do we got today? Who do we got today as a student, Len?
We have one student, which is surprising. We may be recording this in a different time of the season where it's not as busy for students to arrive in our facility. We do have previous students that are very upset that they did not get on any podcast recordings. I will say that.
I mean, their clinicals were too short. That's their fault, right?
That's fault, right?
Yeah.
We have Gavin Harden, Harden, Gavin Harden from Wisconsin.
So I'm going to be transparent. I think it's believe it or not, 10 years in, 400 episodes, wherever we're at, we don't record these live every week. Just being transparent with everybody. I think everybody knows that, right? But so we have Gavin right now. It's essentially Christmas. I'll fluff this up a little bit. So just mental note, if you're a prospective student looking to go into PT school and you enjoy Christmas, right, you may not want to go to the University of Wisconsin, right? Because they put their clinicals right through Christmas, and and we're working Gavin that day because we're all off. That's crazy to work on Christmas. So we're going to have Gavin treat all our patients that day, right, Gav?
Yeah, that's right. Whatever you need.
All right, Gav, what do we got for a question today?
All right. So today, Samantha from Virginia asks, I'm a physical therapy student, but worked for a few years as a personal trainer before going back to school. My goal is to open a cash-based PT practice. Do you think it's reasonable for a new grad PT to consider starting a cash-based practice?
I love it. Great question. This is Samantha. Great question. I feel like more and more of our PT students are saying this when they're in clinicals, right? And, I think, that's great. There's a lot of perks to cash-based. I mean, it's probably not as different as people kind of give it credit, right? It's just opening up like a different type of a practice, right? But I'm excited to hear people's thoughts on this because I think we could probably attack this from a dozen different ways. But why don't we do this? Why does everybody kind of think of like a pearl that you think would be very good for a student that is looking to get into a cash-based practice and, some of the things to help them succeed. Because I do think there's a lot of things we do here. I think some of us have worked elsewhere and come here back to Champion. Some of us started this as from a student to right into working at Champion. So, again, like maybe you don't even realize some of the things we do are probably key to success. But why don't we start with that? Who wants to go first? We could go a lot of different ways. Dave, let me hear. Let's all try to give one little pearl because I think we're all going to have a slightly different thought. But Dave?
Yeah, mine is that if you would like to work in cash-based practice, you have to realize that personally and financially upfront, you're going to have to not depend on a weekly same salary, right? Like you're going to be your own marketing machine, your own lead generation. So whether you start at a place or create your own place, like you are the engine behind that financially in terms of like getting people. So I had to make sure that I wasn't, going to plan any big trips or like do anything crazy during the first, 2 months that I started, because again, I was more or less, going to have to kind of get on my feet versus when I worked in a regular ortho non-cash based place. I had a stable paycheck, every 2 weeks or whatever. So that'd be my nugget, is just set yourself up to make sure, you're not over your head.
I like that. So the first tip is planning for the worst, kind of,
Yes.
right? Which isn't bad, right? That's a good way to start. I mean, we're very conservative with the way we plan at Champion, right? I think that's part of it. So I like that. Good. All right, Dave, I like that. Kev, what do you got?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think there's a huge difference between joining a cash-based clinic as an employee and trying to open it yourself. I think that if your goal is to open one, kind of like you and Lenny did, you should really wait a little bit longer in your career. I just feel like if I pictured myself coming out of school and trying to open my own cash-based clinic or any business, it's going to result in worse care because I'm spending so much time learning about how to operate a business that I can't put as much energy into learning how to be a good physical therapist. And I think with that type of model, when someone's paying out of pocket, you really need to deliver high quality care. It needs to be different than the type of care you get in an insurance-based clinic. So I do think that it's a good ambition, and I think it's good that more people want to do it. It's a lot of fun to work in this model. But I think to rush into it after just graduating, like I have some classmates who, wanted to go down that path. I think that it takes away from the what we actually need to be good at, which is treating patients first. And then when you get a little bit of experience with that, then you can try to look at the business side and open up the cash base. So I would just encourage people not to rush into it too quickly until you have your kind of skills down as a physical therapist.
Really good point. I mean, I hate to say that I always tend to lean on that too. Like, don't rush into this here because you do have to be an expert clinician to an extent, right? If you're trying to do like an exceptional service here, you have to be able to provide an exceptional service. I don't think people know how much effort it goes into in starting a business. And even if you're just a PT with a massage table in the corner of a gym, there's still stuff you need to learn, right? And if you don't, you're going to be bad at business, right? And that's, bad for lots of reasons, right? Maybe that's, it's not going to grow as fast as you are. So I kind of like that, Kevin, is get comfortable as a clinician so that way you have the bandwidth to be also a good business owner and to learn that because I think people take that for granted, right? People have no idea how many hours of effort Lenny and I put into this at the beginning where we kind of said, okay, we have to figure out how to run a business, right? And it was a maniacal consumption of our brains for probably the first 4 to 5 years. We didn't grow as clinicians as much because that's all we focused on. So I love that, Kev. Let me see. How about Dan Pope?
Well, first, I think it's good, right? You see a lot of dentists, chiropractors, they go out, they have to kind of start their own business. Obviously, you can part another business, but it's more common in other industries. And I think one of the common things you see with physical therapists is we're not very good at running a business, right? And we're in the United States, and healthcare is very different from country to country. But where we're at, I think that US PTs aren't taught much about it. And there's almost like a sense of elitism against running a business, right? When a patient comes in, we have to practice obviously evidence-based care. But if you're ever trying to get people through the door, right, and you're not trying to kick them out as fast as possible, that's like a disservice to the patient, which I don't think is a great way of thinking. And for every other business in the world, it doesn't operate that way. So it ends up being kind of challenging from a physical therapy standpoint of what to do. With that being said, if you're going to start something that's cash based, I think one of the major changes from more kind of standard insurance model is that you have to know how to market. And marketing ends up becoming a really, really big part of what you do on a regular basis. And I think that at Champion, we're really lucky just because when I first started, I had to do much more marketing to get people through the door. But now I don't have to do much of anything. It's kind of self-propelled. And partly it's because I've established myself, but also because Champion supplies leads regularly for me, and I don't have to do much anything. But if you don't have that, that's going to be a ton of additional work. So you're going to have to get out there, talk to surgeons, talk to different communities, ask people to write referrals or write reviews, then gain more referrals from those people. You probably need to track referral sources to figure out where people are coming from. Then you have to figure out your financials and just try to figure out if you're making enough money in general. And it's an enormous beast. What I will say is that I don't want to dissuade people from doing it because in general, I want more physical therapists to be business minded. But yeah, just be prepared to run a business, learn how to market, and then your skill set has to be much more diverse than just learning how to treat people well.
This is awesome. I feel like this is backfiring, right? Because people are gonna be like, I am not doing at the end of this episode, they're like, dang.
Revoking their applications.
I
I'm
love it.
overwhelmed.
Let me see. Anthony, what do you what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as someone who's relatively fresh out of school, I don't think it would be fair to my patients if I was also trying to run my own business at the same time. I think for me, I need to do such a better job of like becoming a good clinician, and I think that's priority number one right now. So if I were to also have to work on leads and going out and meeting surgeons and promoting my own business, I feel like that would take away from the care that I would give to my patients. So kind of going off what Kevin was saying earlier, I agree with everything that he said. And right now, having you guys kind of take the lead on all of that stuff kind of helps me become a better clinician in the meantime. And then, maybe later down the road, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it may be, that might be something that I could get into. But right now, being able to focus on my clinical skills is kind of priority for me. So I just don't feel like it would be in the best care for my patients to do that.
Makes sense. I like that. And you're going through it right now, like as somebody that, just getting started, just kind of switching over to that cash-based model. It makes sense, right? You're focused on being the best you can be as a clinician.
But
So I like it.
keep in mind when Anthony, he had rehab with us in high school and college. He went to PT school and did a rotation with us, and then he went out and worked for what, a year or so
Yep.
at a previous facility in a traditional, insurance-based model. So, he is newer as a PT, but he has a lot of experience with us, and he has patient experience. So I think yes, we do drive a lot of the leads and marketing just by the name, and just relationships with doctors. So I think it makes it easier for people like him and others. I'm curious to not to hijack this, but I'm curious to hear what Scaduto has to say as somebody who came on
Ooh,
as
wow.
a student
Wow.
and had no experience besides
You just
being our student, which was big. So yeah.
you just called Mike out on that. So I guess we're going to Mike next. What do we got, Mike?
Yeah, time for a rebuttal. No, I'm just kidding. I
Right.
guess my thought is like, what are the major challenges that you're going to face as a cash-based PT clinic? I think, customer acquisition is going to be a challenge early on. And then maybe churn. Like you get people in the door, it may be tougher to sell your product, versus an insurance-based model where they get a script for 3 times a week. So I think if you try and do everything all at once, if you're trying to be very broad, and treat all different kinds of conditions or surgeries, that may be more challenging for you. You're going to be very spread. You're going to be spread very thin. So I think we say it every time. Basically, I think you have to have something that you really excel at in a specific field, whether that's, baseball, a specific sport or a specific type of injury. I think that helps from a marketing perspective, but it also probably helps you retain clients over the long run. And you maybe have to spend a little less time going out and searching for all these different types of patients with different surgeons or different doctors or in different communities. You can really focus and try and capture a certain percentage of, X doctors' patients, and maybe your time is more well spent there. So I think having a plan on how you're going to retain clients over time is probably the most important thing, instead of trying always to find new patients, like how you're going to keep people in the door.
Makes sense. I think that's a good one, Mike, too. And just to relay a little bit at the beginning of Champion, right? Like the whole concept of the red velvet rope, right? Like when you're first getting started, you kind of can't say no to anybody, right? Well, one, you have to eat, right? You have to pay your rent. So like that's a big part of it, right? So you kind of like the floodgates are open. And then as you get more established, I think you can, you start finding your niche population a little bit more, right? Like your ideal client a little bit more. And then obviously, I think that's what catapults you to success is that, if you're going to be a general cash-based PT, I think it's harder to have like long-term growth and success. If you're a specific expert in something, then it's going to grow. So you have to flip that from the beginning, because at the beginning, there's no red velvet rope. Everybody's in because you need patience. You need to pay the rent, right? You have to not get stuck there, right? Because you need to slowly start getting more specific to your niche, or you're gonna probably not hit that catapult of a progression. So good one, Mike. I like that. Lisa, what do you got?
Um, Yeah, I mean, building off kind of what everybody else has said, but I feel like so I'm about to start my 6th year at Champion. So 5 years in, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly, it might be a year off. But either way, this past year was the first year where I feel like my schedule was fuller than the time that I had for people. So it took like that long for, it took a good few years, even with everything we've said of like a cash-based place with a lot of leads and connections and all that kind of stuff. But because as the rowing niche person, right, it took time for me to kind of build to the point that I have a caseload that is like I have a much more dependable paycheck. Like my schedule is always pretty full. I have many more people sending me patients, like all that kind of stuff. And that was even with when I was working before I joined Champion. I did a lot of pro bono work with rowers. So I like had my name kind of already out there. So I just feel like it really depends on where you are and what your niche is and how much time you have to network and, all that kind of stuff I really, like everybody else has said, I really can't imagine doing all that on top of learning how to be a PT in like the real world. You come out of school and you like have some good ideas, but I mean, all of us are kind of fans of like, you don't know what you don't know until it comes upon you, right? And I would feel really bad personally if I was hitting too much of that, like, wow, I really don't know what to do with this if someone's paying me cash. I feel like in the insurance model, it's a lot kind of, I felt less guilty kind of personally learning through that when that was the model that people were coming to me in. But
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, for me, I think a lot of people feel that way too. You feel you put a lot more pressure on yourself, right? When you're in this model, especially if it's your business too, you're going to put more pressure on yourself too. So, something to kind of keep in mind. You have to be prepared for that. Len, what do you got here? Getting
No,
back
good.
to
I'm nervous. What do
getting
I
back to the
add?
question. I intentionally wanted to go
Yeah,
with you last, but like, back to the question is like, what does it take to start a cash-based practice? I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I'm eager to
right.
hear what you did because you have done this. What do you got?
Pope stressed me out with his answer because I was like, wow, yeah, we did all that. We
I
got through that.
I was actually thinking about quitting after Pope's thing. I'm like, maybe I need to go back to insurance base. Right.
Yeah, I mean, because you do have to track all that and rewind to what Dan said and others, but you have to track everything, and we track so much stuff. So you need to know what to track, right, and figure all that out, and have a good business mind and where can you be better and what's the capital that you're going to use to get going, and you're going to take a loan out, is it going to be cash, do you is it an LLC or an S corp, how do you go through all that, what's the accounting process, everything. You need to buy a table, you need to buy everything that you need for exercise equipment, and maybe if you're seeing people post up wound care type stuff, and just all that is just like this process. With that, I mean, I know all of us are kind of discouraging, it sounds like. Um, it's very possible to do it. I think if you start small, you start with a low budget, you don't go too big early on, and you literally your practice grows with you. You don't grow into the practice. I think that's key. If you have a little table in a corner of a CrossFit box or some kind of gym, maybe a good starting point. And you better hope that gym is going to feed you a lot of people, because it's not going to probably feed you as many as you think. It all sounds good in nature or on paper, but it oftentimes doesn't materialize. So you better be able to pivot and have time to go see doctors, which takes you out of the clinic or your table area to go treat patients. And so it's a process. But I think this person was a strength coach for a while. So maybe you are established in the area, and you are known by your clients, and that might be a good starting point for you. I know people who were in that position, or massage therapists that became PTs and were successful because they already had this group of people that they have interacted with and have that ability to communicate in a medical way. And it just comes down to, do you know how to treat their newer injuries as a PT? Meaning, can you progress somebody that's 2 days out of an ACL out to return to sport? You have the facilities to do it and the abilities to do it. or for example, or other issues. Somebody comes in with a red flag. What do you do? Who do you communicate with? Or you have something that's on your schedule, you have no clue, right? Who do you talk to? Like, do you have a mentor or somebody you could communicate with to get on the phone after the visit and figure out what did I do wrong? How can I make it better? Do I have to contact the patient and give them an update? Where do they go? There's so many different things to have to consider. And so I think it's possible. I definitely think it's possible for a certain circumstance of people, including yourself who asked the question. But just be ready for many circumstances to come about, and have people around you that can support you.
Ugh,
Right.
sounds terrible.
It
Right,
was. It
right.
was. I remember you and I communicating a lot. I was living in Alabama. You were up here, and yeah,
Ugh,
we talked a lot.
I'm
And we had each other.
exhausted.
Like, we had each other
Right,
to like
that's
bump ideas off of, and what
right.
about this? What about that? Yeah.
Right. I don't know if people appreciate that too. It's always good to have somebody that you can talk to, right? Like, so you're doing this solo, it's even harder, right? So, Kev, did you have something?
Yeah, I guess I had a question for you and Lenny. Is now you see a lot of like clinicians that put out blueprints for starting your own cash-based clinics, or people take business classes. How did you guys do it? Did you take any business classes, or did you just kind of like, you know, do your own research, I guess, and talk to other people who are doing something similar?
You know me better than that, Kevin, right? So
Yeah.
I wanted to win the world, right? So that's like my mentality on this. So I did everything. There's not that much though. So first, I bought every book about it. There's not that many books about it. Even just starting a PT practice, right? Like let alone a cash-based one. I think there actually was a cash-based one back at the time. So I did all that, right? I went to the APTA private practice sections, meetings, like how to start a business, like that sort of thing. I did a course, they had a home study course that you could do. And again, somewhat helpful, not that great. I did hire several coaches because, again, I'm maniacal, right? So we hired a PT coach, I hired a fitness coach, and I hired a business coach in addition to our accountant, but probably more so our attorney. Our attorney's great. Our attorney is a physical therapist. One of our attorneys. We have many attorneys. So the longer you're in business, the more attorneys you need, right, for various things. But for us, what our main business attorney is a physical therapist. So he gets that, and he went back to school, and he actually teaches a lot for the private practice section. So yes, I totally like put myself into that world. But one of the biggest coaches I think I hired was fitness related, right? So Pat Rigsby was a big resource for me along the way, but I was also like growing at the same time that a lot of like, our peers were like Eric Cressy, Mike Robertson, like people like that. Like there was this evolution 10 years ago where everybody was kind of growing and learning from each other. So I think we had that. So there's some cash-based PT things out there now. So like my only comment on that is I know there's some good guys out there doing like trying to help, right? Just make sure that they were successful before you start taking their advice, because business advice might be the easiest thing to regurgitate from the internet without actually doing it, right? So keep that in mind. As business owners, Lenny and I see a lot of things online that we just chuckle about that like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, that's a good question, Kevin. Then I would just end with this. The one thing I think we haven't talked about, you want to talk about success with the cash-based practice. I think it all comes down to customer service. And I think that's what's different, right? Sure, you have to understand the business. Everything we talked about is probably one. You have to understand business stuff. You have to like be an expert at what you do. For me, it's selfless customer service, right? In the last 12 hours, it's the morning, right? I'm texting a mom, I'm texting a new patient, I'm texting a doctor, I have two doctors about patients, about stuff, it's selfless customer service. It's a service-based industry. There are too many people, especially young students, getting out of college now and starting to do this, and they're doing it to make money, or they're doing it for the business, they're doing it from themselves. That's not why we got into this profession, right? So this is the difference between insurance and cash base. If you don't want a phone call after 4 p.m. because you're off duty, it's not the right move for you. If you don't want to be texting people at 10:30 at night, sure, sometimes it's fantasy football related, but there's another one. If you don't want your patients in your fantasy football league, then you shouldn't start a cash-based practice, right? Stuff like that. Like it is about customer service, and it's about being there for people. They can text me years after and I'm still there for them, right? It's almost Christmas time. All of our college athletes are coming home right now and texting all of us and saying, I need to see you. I need to check in, right? So you have to have that selfless customer service. You're there for them. And that's an important thing here. In an insurance-based world, it's a little different. And I hate to say it, but like you got a boss, you got workloads you're trying to like, do like, criteria for, insurance companies, like so much crap that you're dealing with. It's a little bit different. So anyway, that was a big episode. So kudos to you guys on that. I think that's going to be a good episode for a while on this, but great answers for everybody. Hope we haven't talked you out of it, but I hope what we did was help you take a step back to just say, think this through a little bit here. So that way, I think if you know all these things going into it, you're going to be more set up for success. Okay. So great question. If you have anything like that, head to mikereinold.com. Please keep asking away and please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we'll keep doing these episodes for you. Thank you so much.